Tonight, hope to talk on the dependent origination, paticca samuppada. This is quite one of the deep topics in the Buddha's teachings. And this dependent origination is quite an important topic. It is stated in the suttas that there are few important topics in the Buddha's teachings which, if you understand, you can attain the various stages of path and fruit, aryahood. So dependent origination is one. Another one is the 5 aggregates of attachment, panchupadana khandha. Another one is the 6 sense bases, salayatana. Another one is the 4 elements, 4 great elements, the 4 dhatus. So these are among the very important topics. So this dependent origination refers to the dependent arising of all things in the world. Everything in the world did not suddenly come about by itself. Many people think there's a creator that suddenly created everything in the world. But in the Buddha's teachings, everything in the world arose through conditions. Absolutely everything in the world arose through conditions. And they cease through conditions. And everything is in a flux, changing all the time. And even like this earth, the Buddha talked about world systems expanding and contracting. And the Buddha said that one world system consists of one sun. So in other words, when we look into the sky at night, we see the stars. There are countless stars. And they are a very long distance away. Some of them, even when although we can see them, they are no more there. They have ceased to exist. What is reaching us now is the light from that star so far away, because it has to travel such a long distance. So every world system consists of a sun. In other words, every star that we see out there may have human beings. And the Buddha talked about world systems expanding and contracting. Refers to the galaxy. Every galaxy is a world system. The Buddha talked about the small world system, and then the middling world system, and the great world system, great 1,000-fold, small 1,000-fold world system, then the middling 1,000-fold world system, and then the great 1,000-fold world system. So the small world system consists of, the Buddha says, 1,000 world system, that means 1,000 stars. But that is only a very approximate figure, because in the Indian language they talk about 500, they talk about 1,000, they talk about 84,000. These are only approximate. So when the Buddha talked about world systems expanding and contracting, nowadays scientists see that the galaxy and the stars are moving away from each other. That is the expanding world system. It will keep expanding, the Buddha says, up to a certain limit, and then it will stop, and then it will contract, and then it will contract. It takes a very long time, and then it keeps contracting until the stars come near each other. So now we have one sun in our solar system. After an extremely long time, a second sun will appear close to us. And that happens, all living creatures will die, including human beings. The plants will die. And it keeps shrinking. After a long time, a third sun will come near us. And then the rivers will start to dry up, the streams. And then the fourth sun will come near us, and then the lakes will start to dry up. The ocean gets shallower and shallower. So in this way, slowly, eventually, when the seventh star comes near us, the whole world will burn. The earth will burn. And all these stars will coalesce together, will come together. So when it comes together, it will burn, and the Buddha says, this fire is such a great fire that it will burn right up to the Brahma heavens. And the second jhana heaven is much further away, so it doesn't reach the second jhana heaven. So then that all these stars will come together and form one huge mass. I think this is what nowadays scientists call the black hole. You heard about the black hole? It's a huge mass of stars. But it's called a black hole because you cannot see its light. Because it's such a huge mass that its magnetic pull is extremely great. Any comet, any asteroid goes near it, gets sucked into it. And it is burning, it is full of heat, full of fire. But because it's such a huge mass, with such a huge magnetic pull, even its light rays, called photons, light particles, try to go out. They go out and they get pulled back. They go out and they get pulled back. So that is why the light rays, you cannot see the light from this huge mass. So they call it a black hole. Then after an extremely long time, what happens? This thing will explode. This is what I think the scientists now call the Big Bang, isn't it? It explodes, and then slowly all the stars will form, and slowly it will evolve, and the world, the earth will reappear. Every world system will reappear. So this has been going on continuously from the beginning of eternity until the end of eternity. It is a very natural process. It's not like some superhuman, super being up there suddenly created the world. So everything in the world, the Buddha says, is just like that. Due to conditions, slowly things appear. But because the greatest characteristic of the whole universe is one thing, anicca, impermanence. That is the greatest characteristic of the world, impermanence. Everything in the world is impermanent. So that we have to remember. So anatta, sometimes people don't understand the word anatta. We say emptiness, sunyata, kong. Our Chinese interpretation of kong sometimes is a bit out. We think means basically there's nothing. It's not that there's nothing. The meaning of anatta, the meaning of kong, is that there's no permanent entity that exists by itself, that does not change. Everything is changing all the time due to causes and conditions of yin yang. So everything is changing, appearing and passing away, appearing and passing away. And there's nothing absolutely in the whole universe that stays put. If anything can stay the way it is, that is called atta, self, in the Buddha's teachings. So the Buddha says that because of this, this world is devoid of a core, an essence that does not change. So that is anatta. Unfortunately, because Buddhism now is being translated, the Buddha's teachings being translated into different languages. Sometimes the translation is out, way out. For example, last time they didn't translate jhana as trance. So it gives people the wrong impression. You think, oh, what's the use of jhana? When you abide in the state of jhana, meditative absorption, you are like in a trance state. You don't know anything that's happening around you. That's the absolute opposite of what jhana means. Jhana is a state of clear awareness. Absolutely pure awareness. That's why in the description of the fourth jhana, the Buddha says that the state of the fourth jhana is complete purity of sati. complete purity of sati. So it's because of misconceptions like this due to wrong translation that people have different wrong ideas about things like jhana. So the same with anatta. Sometimes they translate it as no soul. It's not what the Buddha meant. If you say there's no soul, you come up with this concept like in Abhidhamma, that when a being dies and is reborn somewhere else, nothing goes from here to there. That is the Abhidhamma concept. The Abhidhamma concept is consciousness ceases here and it starts somewhere else. Nothing travels from here to there. But in the Buddha's teachings, there is a soul. There is a soul that travels from the deathbed of this being to this new being. That's why the Buddha says, if a person's karma is such that he has to be reborn in the womb, he has to wait for certain conditions. And what are the conditions? Mother and father must come together. And then the mother must be in the right season, fertile. And then the egg is fertilized. And then this, what is called in the suttas, Gandhabba. Sometimes they call it like intermediate being enters, lodges itself in the fertilized egg and becomes a being there. So the concept of this soul, in Chinese we call it Ling Hun, yeah? Ling. How do you call it in Mandarin? Ling Fan. Ling Hun. So there is such a thing that something travels into the womb. This is very clear from the suttas. But it is just a bundle of energy that is changing all the time. Not, for example, like the Christian concept that a soul means a being that is eternal being. There is a self there. For us, it's just a bundle of energy containing your characteristics, your DNA, your memory, and all these things. So the Buddha's teaching on dependent origination is this, that everything is born due to conditions and it dies or ceases due to the ceasing of these conditions. So there is a general law of dependent origination which the Buddha formulated like this. This being, that comes to be. With the arising of this, that arises. This not being, that comes not to be. With the ceasing of this, that ceases. In other words, certain things come into existence due to certain conditions, and it ceases due to certain conditions. So, the importance of understanding dependent origination can be seen in certain suttas. For example, in Majjhima Nikaya Sutta 28, Sariputta, this Arahant Sariputta quoted the Buddha and he said, he who sees dependent origination sees the Dhamma. He who sees the Dhamma sees dependent origination. So, if we understand the Dhamma, we understand dependent origination. And if we understand dependent origination, we understand the Dhamma. Another sutta, Samyutta Nikaya 12.27, the Buddha said, now in as much monks as the Aryan disciple knows dependent origination, knows the arising of dependent origination, knows the ceasing of dependent origination, knows the way going to the ceasing of dependent origination. He is what we call the Aryan disciple who has won the view, who has won insight, who has arrived at this good Dhamma, who sees this good Dhamma, who possesses the knowledge of the trained man, who possesses the wisdom of the trained man, who has entered the stream of the Dhamma, who has the Aryan insight of revulsion, who stands knocking at the door of the deathless. So here the Buddha says, if you understand dependent origination, you have entered the stream of the Dhamma. In other words, you have attained stream entry. That's why it is important to understand dependent origination. Now in the Samyutta Nikaya 12.10, the Buddha said that when he was still a bodhisattva before enlightenment, he contemplated the cause of suffering, and he understood dependent origination to a certain extent. For example, the Buddha contemplated why is there suffering in the world? So from contemplating this, he understood there is suffering in this world because all beings must age, and when we age, we become sick, and after some time we must die. All beings must go through this process. There is not a single being you can find that does not die. Because in the Buddha's teachings, all beings must have a body. There is no being without a body in the Buddha's teachings. In the Samyutta Nikaya, the Buddha says, there is no coming and going of consciousness without the other aggregates, feeling, perception, volition, and consciousness. So whenever you have consciousness, consciousness must lodge itself in a body. So when consciousness comes together with that body must age, and it must sicken, and it must die. So that's how he understood about suffering. And then he asked himself again, but why is it that beings must become old, sicken, and die? Then he understood, it's because we are born into this world. When we are born into this world, that is the nature of the world, that everyone must go through this process. If there was no birth, we would not have to become old, sicken, and die. And then he asked himself again, why is there birth? Then he contemplated, it's because of attachment, upadana. Because of attachment, then you have birth. So in this way, he contemplated backwards this link of 12 links of dependent origination, and he understood that finally all this suffering, or the ultimate cause of suffering is ignorance. So now I will explain these 12 links of dependent origination. When we talk about dependent origination, we can talk about dependent origination of many things. But in the Buddha's teachings, the most important thing we want to understand is suffering, and how suffering arises, and how suffering can cease. The Buddha said, ultimately, he teaches only one thing. He teaches only suffering and the ending of suffering. All else is not important. The Buddha says that he knows a lot of things, but he does not want to talk about them because it is not beneficial to us. Our life is so short, and nowadays a lot of people want to know this, want to know that. So we go into the internet, the world of knowledge. You want to find out about this, you want to find out about that. That is quite good, because it can help you in certain ways. But ultimately, if you don't answer the question of why you are existing in this world now, who made you, or what made you, and where are you going after this? If you don't ask all these questions and find out the answers, by the time in a few more years, when death comes knocking on your door, you'll be totally frightened and confused. The Buddha says that most people, when we are about to die, we are very afraid for various reasons. One is we have bad karma. Another one, we don't have enough blessings. Another one, we don't understand the Dhamma. So because we don't understand the Dhamma, we don't know what life is all about. We don't know where we are going after death. Or if you know and you're going to a woeful plane of existence, then you are even more frightened. So it is important to understand all these questions. These are ultimately the most important questions in life. But only people with deep wisdom will think, will stop and think. Why am I struggling so hard to make money? Why am I struggling so hard to go through life? What is life all about? Very few people actually will stop and think about these basic questions. Those who think about it are those who are spiritually mature, have gone through this cycle of births and deaths a long time. We have evolved to the stage where we are mature enough to stop and ask, why am I going around this cycle of birth and death? Doing the same things again and again, lifetime after lifetime. When we have suffered enough, then slowly we will try to look for the truth about life. So now I will explain these 12 links. The first link, independent origination, is ignorance. Ignorance is the first cause, you can say, of suffering. So ignorance in the suttas, before I go into that, firstly I like to say the sources for the understanding of dependent origination. The main source is from the Samyutta Nikaya. I mentioned yesterday that Samyutta Nikaya is the most important Nikaya in my view, because it deals with all the deep topics of the Buddha's teachings. And there is one chapter called the Nidana Samyutta, the 12th chapter of Samyutta Nikaya. There are many suttas dealing with dependent origination. Nidana is conditions or conditional causation. It has the same meaning as paticca samuppada. Paticca samuppada means dependent arising, dependent origination of all things in existence. So that is the main source for understanding the Buddha's words on dependent origination. Then besides that, you have, for example, the Mahanidana Sutta in the Digha Nikaya. It's one of the long discourses where the Buddha talked about dependent origination. But since it's only one sutta, you can only get to know about dependent origination very limited knowledge. Just like some people, they don't investigate the suttas. They think if you want to understand sati or satipatthana, you only need to study the Mahasatipatthana Sutta or the Satipatthana Sutta and you understand everything about Satipatthana. Absolutely untrue. That is just one sutta, so it only can give you a little knowledge about sati. If you want to understand about sati or Satipatthana, you have to study the chapter on Satipatthana in the Samyutta Nikaya, which has many suttas explaining Satipatthana from various angles. Whenever you read one sutta, you will understand the Buddha's words from one angle. Just understanding from one angle is not enough. So you have to understanding from different angles. Just like you see an object, you see from one direction, you only can understand it in that direction. But you see it from different directions, then you get an overall picture which is complete. So in the same way, when we want to understand Satipatthana, we have to study the Satipatthana chapter of the Samyutta Nikaya, just as we have to study the Nidana Samyutta, the chapter, if we want to understand dependent origination. So in the Nidana chapter of the Samyutta Nikaya, it is explained that avidya, ignorance, means ignorance of the Four Noble Truths, ignorance of suffering, ignorance of how suffering originates, ignorance of how suffering ceases, and ignorance of the path going to the ceasing of suffering. In other words, the Four Noble Truths. So that's the meaning of avidya. So because of ignorance of the Dhamma, ordinary worldlings, due to this ignorance, then second link, ignorance causes sankhara. When we chant the 12 links of dependent origination, if you all come here to do chanting, I'm sure you follow the Thai monks, you know this chant. It goes like this, avijja paccaya sankhara, sankhara paccaya viññānaṁ, viññāna paccaya nāma-rūpaṁ, nāma-rūpa paccaya salayatanaṁ, salayatana paccaya paso, pasa paccaya vedana, vedana paccaya tanha, etc. So, avidya causes, conditions, the arising of sankhara.